Today we're going to be going through how you can build Chrome extensions with Bubble. We're going to cover quite a bit, but I've split this video into 3 separate sections. The first section is simply going to cover displaying your Bubble app in a Chrome extension. So what happens when you click on an icon up here? We're going to try and get our Bubble app to show up something like that. We are then going to look at some of the ways you can present your Chrome extension. It can be a pop-up, a sidebar, or a modal, and we'll go through all that. And we'll show how you can direct users to a specific URL when you open up your Chrome extension for the first time. We're then going to move on to some of the key actions we can use with Charles, which is the Bubble plugin we're going to be using to build our Chrome extension. So things like accessing text that's selected by the user on screen, the tab info, copying text to a clipboard, capturing a screenshot, and showing a native alert. And then at the end, we're actually going to get into 4 specific examples of types of Chrome extensions you might build with Charles. So we're going to look at how you might build a bookmark manager, how you might automate some browser actions, how you might summarize text with a GPG, and then also build a Bubble component library. So the timestamps for all this are going to be below. Do feel free to skip ahead to a relevant section if there's something you specifically want to learn. Okay, to get started, you're going to need to go to buildwithcharles.io and click on the Get Started for Free button. That's going to direct you to this page where you can download the Charles source code for free. So this is basically a framework that makes it really easy to turn your Bubble app into a Chrome extension. So click on Get Now. You will be asked to sign up for an account. So I'm just going to put in these details really quickly. And then once you have created an account, simply accept the terms of service, click on Get Now, and you'll be able to download the Charles source code from here. Just click on Download, and it's going to download in a zipped file. So you're going to want to go to your downloads, wherever that may be, and then you want to click on the zipped file, which is going to spit out a folder. And then you're going to need to open this in a code editor. So you're not going to be doing much hardcore coding in this video, but you are actually just going to need a code editor simply to kind of change 1 or 2 lines, more specifically to direct it to your own Bubble app. So I'm using Microsoft Visual Studio Code, but you can really use whatever type of code editor you want. I'm going to click on Open here. Once I go down to here, I'm going to open that up. And then you're going to see we have a bunch of files here on the left-hand side. And there is one specific line that we're going to need to change, and that's going to be in the popup.js one. Because you can see at the moment we have this app URL, which is actually linked to the Charles demo app. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace this with the URL of our own Bubble app. But before I do, I might just actually show how it's going to look when we have it in an actual Chrome extension. So I'm not going to change anything now, but I'm going to go back to my Chrome browser. I'm going to click on this icon here, which is effectively where we manage all our extensions. I'm then going to click on Manage Extensions, and I'm going to go to Load Unpacked. And I'm going to go back to that section where I have my Charles extension source code. You may wish to move it somewhere else, but this is going to do fine for me for there now. So we'll click on that. And you can see straight away we're actually being brought to this Welcome to Charles page where we have a bunch of kind of helpful instructions, documentation, support links, all that good stuff. And what we're also going to realize now is if we click on our extension button again, we now have the option to pin the Charles extension, and then it starts appearing up here, which is exactly what we want. And if we click on it at the moment, because we haven't done any customization, like I said, it's actually going to show the Charles demo app, which is kind of just meant to showcase a lot of the features that Charles comes with. But we obviously want to show our own Bubble app in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click out to exit that extension. I'm going to go back into my code, and I'm going to replace this app URL with the URL associated with my own Bubble app. So I've started a new Bubble app here. You can see here it's called Charles Demo Testing, and I just have a blank page. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a group. I'm going to drop it in. I'm going to call this main container. I'm going to simply give it a bit of padding, and we'll make it take up the full height of the page. And I'm just going to put it in here and say Cranford Tech Chrome extension app. And we'll give that a bit of a style, and we'll put it in the center of the page. I have to make it a lot smaller. Layout, put it in the center. And then I'm going to go to preview. And again, I'm obviously building this in test mode. So I'm going to take the test URL. So if I go here and take everything just before the debug mode, copy that. Then I go back to my source code and I replace everything here with my own app URL. I'm then going to click on File, Save. And then I'm going to go back to the Extensions Manager section of my browser. And I'm going to click on Refresh here. And this is actually a really nice feature of developing Chrome extensions. You don't need to re-upload the code every time. You can just click this refresh button and it automatically pulls it in from the location in which you're developing it. So now if I go back to my browser page here and I click on the extension icon, you can see we're getting something, but it's not really what we wanted. And I can see here the URL Charles Demo Testing is actually the URL we wanted. But the issue is we need to change an iframes setting. So if you go back to your bubble editor, if you go to settings, general, and then if you scroll down a bit, you'll see here there's an option to allow to render the app in a frame, iframe, X-frame options. You're going to want to set this to allow all iframes. And once that's done, we should be able to refresh our application or refresh our web page, I should say. And then when we click on the extension, you can see now we have our CronverTech Chrome extension text coming in from our app here, which is exactly what we want. Now, in order to make building this a bit easier, what I do recommend is you set the dimensions of your app to be equal to the dimensions that the Chrome extension is going to have. And if you want to find out the exact extensions of our popup, we can go back into our code. We can go to popup.html, and you can see here that this is how we adjust the height and the width of the pop-up. And the default is 320 pixels wide and 640 pixels high. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to make that a bit smaller. I don't like the way it's so big there. But let's go to our index page. Let's set the default width to be 320 and the default height to be 640. And I'm also going to do nothing actually for the group. We'll leave that as is. But now if we refresh and we open up our pop-up, you can see we don't have that extra scroll bar at the side. Now, let's say we wanted this to be more of a square. What we could do is if we go back into our code, let's change this to 400 by 400. So we'll do that. I'm going to save this, Command S. We'll go back to our extensions manager, refresh that. And I'm also going to change dimensions here. So we'll do 400 by 400. And now if we open up our extension, you can see we're getting our square. So that's how you'd adjust the dimensions if you're using the pop-up. I am going to change this back just to 320 by 640 because I think that's more useful for most Chrome extensions, to be honest. But obviously depends on exactly what you're doing. Save that, back in here, and finally back in here. Okay, so at the moment we're showing a pop-up, which is what happens when you click on the extension and you get this pop-up window happening here. But as you might remember from our guide earlier, we can also choose a sidebar and a modal. So I'm going to show you now how you can activate either the sidebar or the modal. And I'm going to start off with the sidebar. So again, we're going to have to go back to our code. And the key thing we need to change here is in the background.js file. So there's a lot of instructions here, which can be useful as well. And you can see if you read the very top of it here, we can define the default action when clicking the extension icon, uncomment one of the following options, and make sure the other two are commented out. So you'll see here we have sidebar, we have floating modal, and we have full screen modal. So if we wanted to show the sidebar rather than the pop-up, what we would do is we would uncomment the 4 lines here. And when we say uncomment, what we basically mean is just deleting these forward slashes. So I'm going to delete that one. Going to delete that, going to delete that, and going to delete that. Now we will need to change our app link again. So I'm going to go back to this, I'm going to grab the URL, get rid of that debug mode, copy that, and again, we're just going to replace the default address that's there, paste that in, save it down, and this 400 pixel here represents the width of the sidebar, which we're going to see in a second. Now, before we refresh our Chrome extension, there's one more thing we have to do, and that is if we're not using the pop-up, which we're not because we're using the sidebar, we need to go to our manifest.json file and think of this as almost the kind of, I suppose, the home settings file for your Chrome extension. You can see here it contains a bunch of details around the name, the description, and then a couple of other things as well, which you can go through later. But what you're going to want to delete is here is the default pop-up. So because we're not actually using a default pop-up, we're going to delete this and then make sure the entire line has been deleted. I'm going to save that down. And now when I go back to my extensions manager and refresh, next time I open up my extension, I should get a sidebar that's popping in here. And you can see that's what we have. One thing I would mention about the sidebar is that it doesn't close automatically if you click away from the screen, which can be good. Maybe that's what you want. But one thing you might want to do is add in a icon, a close icon, and then link it to an action to close it. So what I'm going to do is just grab an icon and we're going to say close, change the color. We'll put it into a row element with our title. We'll spread them out. Let's make that a lot smaller. In fact, let's just change that to Cranford Tech for now. And then change the min height on that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to link this close icon to an action. And the action is going to be under plugins. And it's going to be close extension popup / modal. So this time now, when we refresh our application, you can see we can actually do that within the sidebar itself. When I click on this, our sidebar gets put away. So that's how you would use a sidebar. Maybe just go through the other options quickly. Let's try out the floating modal and the full screen modal. So I'm going to comment the sidebar by putting my 2 forward slashes there, there, and there. And then for the floating modal, I'm going to delete that, 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 and that. And once again, we will take our app URL and we're going to put it in here. Okay, save that down, go back, refresh. And this time when we click on our icon, you can see here we have this kind of floating modal up here. And if we click that, we can exit out of it. So that is the floating modal. And we're going to go back and look at the full screen modal now, which I don't think you're really going to likely to be using because it's kind of it's a very specific way of showing your Chrome extension. But again, just to show you how it looks. And let's just delete the existing URL, paste in our own again, save it down, refresh our extension. Oh, so you can see we're getting an error here, which is kind of interesting. So this can be a good way to debug stuff with our Chrome extension. If something goes wrong, it'll actually show up here. Now, in this case, it's highlighting the Cranford Tech Limited, which is just a comment, and it's saying identifier local storage function has already been declared. This isn't really an issue. I'm going to clear that for now. This just happened because we were changing a couple of things. But if we open up our extension again, you'll see this time we're getting our full screen modal there, where it's taking up the full screen. You can use that X to shut it down. So that's the kind of different formats you can use. I actually quite like the sidebar, but I think the pop-up is actually our best bet for most use cases. So I'm going to comment this out again and go back to our pop-up. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to pop-up and we are going to go to, manifest, I should say. And under here, we're going to say default pop-up. And that's going to be popup.html. And that's not quite what we're looking for. And that is more like it. And let's just put the comma there. So yeah, that should do it. Save that down. And then let's go back. Let's refresh. And just check that we're getting our pop-up. Yeah, that's working out well. Now, one more thing I want to do before moving on to some of the key actions you can use with a Chrome extension is opening your extension on a specific site, and I've just added in here, when opened for the first time. So just as a reminder, if we close down that and remove our extension from Chrome, then go to Load Unpacked and go to Downloads, and then load our extension again, you can see here we're getting this welcome page showing up. And this can be really useful for onboarding users. If they're using your extension for the first time, it might be useful to bring them to a page like this where they can see instructions and just some general info on how to use your Chrome extension. And the way you can set this page is if you go to your background.js script and you scroll down to this section here, you'll see that we can define a page that will open when the extension is installed or uninstalled. So we're going to focus on the installed for now. So let's change this from buildwithcharles.io/welcome to, let's just send it to Google just to show you how it works. And we're also going to uncomment the uninstall one, and let's send them to maybe the bubble.io homepage. Let's send them to the New York Times page if they uninstall it. Okay, so let's save that down and let's go to our extensions. Let's remove that one. And now let's load it again. So you can see this time we're brought to Google. And if I uninstall it, I'm brought to the New York Times. So that can just be nice if you want to show, a we miss you message or something like that when someone leaves. And that's a nice way to do it. But I actually don't really want that in our plugin for now. Let's just leave it at the build with Charles one as well. I think I did something unintentionally. No, all good. So save that. We'll close that down. And we will add our extension in one last time and hopefully leave it here from this time on. Open it up and let's pin our extension and let's take a look. Perfect. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of displaying your bubble app in a Chrome extension and the various ways you can do it. We want to move on now to key actions, and this is where we get into the good stuff. This is where your user can actually interact with various things on the page. They can do actions. This is the kind of meat of how your Chrome extension is going to work. And now, in order to use a lot of these actions, we're going to need to install the Charles plugin. So this is a plugin that's kind of a companion to the free source code, and you can get it by going to the plugins tab of your Bubble editor, searching for plugins and just searching for Charles. And once you have installed it, you're going to notice under your elements here that you have a bunch of different elements you can add to your page. Now, I actually do recommend adding pretty much all of these elements if you're going to be using any of the Chrome extension actions. What I like doing is just getting like a floating group and then putting all of the elements in it. So I'm going to start off with the Chrome storage, element HTML, element text, screenshot, selected text and tab info. And now importantly, this is not actually going to be visible to your end user. So I'm just going to go to floating group here. Oh, and I can see all these here. They should not be in the main container. They should be up here. But I'm just actually going to make the floating group 1 width, 1 height, and I'm going to put it down at the bottom. So again, no users are actually going to see this. And oh, we do see we need to fill out a selector if we're going to use that. So yeah, maybe I'll delete that one for now and we can come back to it if necessary. And what was the other one? Element text. Let's get rid of that as well. Okay, so now we have a floating group here with our various Charles elements in it. The user isn't actually going to be able to see any of these, but they are on the page, which means we can use the actions. And the first action I want to look at is simply just accessing some text that's selected by the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's grab a text element, grab it here, and we're going to say text selected by user. And we're going to say Charles selected text A, it's selected text. Let me just bold this to make it obvious. I'm just going to put a gap as well in between these things. Didn't want to bold the whole thing actually, so let's get rid of that. Here's more of this up here. Okay, perfect. Now let's go back to this page here and let's click on our pop-up. And if I try and grab something, then nothing's going to happen because the pop-up closes. But now if I click on the pop-up or the extension icon, you can see here that we're actually able to access the text that the user has selected. Now, this is actually a good example of when you might want to use the sidebar or one of the modals, because this is obviously a bit annoying. You know, you're in the extension, then you want to grab more text, and like even if you have everything, you can see now it's there, but it's just a bit of a crap experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and let's go with the sidebar. So I'm going to uncomment this, save that, and then in our manifest, I'm going to delete the default pop-up, which is just here. So we get rid of that, save that down, refresh our extension, and now I should be able to open this up. And when I grab all this, it's appearing here. Now let's go to a different page and grab some of the stuff here. Bubbles, top moments. Again, if we grab this, you can see here we can access the text. And okay, this is useful getting the text, but we may want to do more things with it. Later on, we're actually going to show how you can summarize text selected by the user with AI. But one simple thing you might want to do is, let's say you just want to save this text down. But what you could do is you could add a button and you could say save text. And in our database, we might create a new type called saved content. Create that, and let's give it a field name saved text, and it's going to be of type text. And now when this is clicked, we're going to create a new thing. Let's go here, create a new thing. The thing we're going to be doing is saved content, and the saved text is going to be equal to Charles's selected text value. Okay, so now when we refresh our application, let's say we want to, for some reasons, just kind of save down this here, get that, save the text, and now if we go into our database, we're actually going to have that in there where we can do more things with it. We could display it in a repeating group as well on our page if we wanted, but that's how you use the kind of that specific Charles element to access text selected by the user. Next, I want to look at the tab info. So let's take a look at our app, and I'm just going to delete this for now. Actually, what I'll do is I'll keep it there and we'll change this part of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say Charles tab info, and we can get two things, I should say, from the Charles tab info element. We can get the tab URL and the tab title. So let's get both of them. Let's start off with the URL. So that's the tab URL, and then the tab title. Okay, so let's go back to our Bubble blog and let's go to tutorials. And let's say we want to, learn how to build an Instagram clone with no code. Quite old, but let's say we wanted to open this up. And we can see now we have access to the URL, which is up here. And we also have the tab title. And where this can be really useful is if you're building like some sort of bookmark manager where you want to save down specific web pages that you want to go back to later. So what you could do is, let's go to new data type, and we'll call this bookmark. I'm going to give two fields. The first field is going to be URL, which is going to be of type text. And the second one is going to be a title, which is also going to be of type text. And then what we can do is when this button is clicked, we're going to change it to save page. And instead of creating a new content, and what I'm actually going to do very quickly is just upgrade to the new workflow editor. Apologies for the detour. I think it's probably just good practice to start using that as much as possible. And when you're using it, it may well be the default. Okay, but when that button is clicked, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new thing. The new thing is going to be a bookmark. And the title is going to be equal to Charles tab info's tab title. And the URL is going to be equal to Charles tab info URL. And let's refresh that. And let's go to a different page. Let's go to tutorials. And let's pick this one here. How to build an AI generated recipe app. Click on our extension. Save the page. And then once we go into our database, what we're going to see is that under bookmarks, we now have access to the title and the URL. And what we can do is we can grab a repeating group just to show all of the ones that we've saved down. So the type is going to be bookmark. I'm going to say one row, or no, we're going to put unlimited rows potentially in height. Take up the full width. And I'm just going to fast forward through this for a second just so you don't watch me doing all the painful formatting stuff. Okay, so just have a basic repeating group put together. I'm going to set the type of content on the group to be bookmark, which is going to be the current style's bookmark. And then each text is going to be equal to parent group's bookmark title. And then when it's clicked, what we're going to do is we're going to Charles open a new tab, and we're going to open parent group's bookmarks URL. So let's take a look at that, refresh. So this time when we save, we should see a new one being created, but we're not, and I'm wondering why. Let's go back to our database. And it's coming through there, so why is that not working? On our repeating group maybe is the issue. Of course, didn't put in to do a search for bookmark there. Let's just delete all three of these for now. Refresh our application. Okay, so let's save that. And then let's go back to another blog post. And let's save this one down as well. And then if we want to open up the previous one, we can click on that and we get it. And if we want to click on that one, it's going to be there as well. So that's actually the basis of a bookmark manager. We'll put a bit more flesh on this later on, but that is why the get tab info element can be so useful. Okay, the next key action I want to look at is copying text to clipboard. And this is actually a really straightforward action to use. What I have here in my setup is just a simple button that says copy text. And I also still have the Charles tab info element on my page. And what I'm going to say is that when the copy text button is clicked, what we're going to do is we're going to use this Charles copy to clipboard action. And we're going to copy in Charles tab info A's, its tab title. So this means whenever we're on a page, so for example, if I'm on here and I click on this, and I just click on copy text, and then if I go anywhere else inside the web, I just grab, like, let's say a text element, and I copy this in, you can see there we're getting the tab title. It'd be much the same if I was on, maybe it'd be slightly different on this. Again, if I open it up, copy text, and then put it in here, you can see it's different again because that's a slightly different section. So this can be useful if you want to copy entire contents from the page, in which case you'd use the Charles element text, and you could reference the body in here. That's something we'll come on to in a minute. But yeah, that's really how you use the copy text to clipboard action that comes with Charles. Okay, let's go through these last two of the key actions. And just to say, there are actually more actions that you can check out. I'm just going to go through the main ones here today, but you can see the full list of actions or in the Charles documentation, which is pretty comprehensive. You can see there's a bunch of things down here, but let's focus on capturing a screenshot for now. So let's go back to our demo app and let's get rid of this for now. But when the user clicks this button, we're going to say take screenshot. And what's going to happen is instead of creating a new bookmark, we're going to go to our database and we're going to have another data type. We're going to call this screenshot. Only going to be one custom field on this, and this is going to be a link. And it's going to be equal to a text type. And when the user clicks on the take screenshot button, we are going to go to Charles capture screenshot. And then importantly, this isn't automatically going to be available from step one. So, you might think the best thing to do would be create a new thing, create a screenshot, and simply get the result of step one, but we don't have that option. But what you can do instead is you can create an event. So let's go here, and we have a screenshot is captured, and we can say create a new thing. The thing can be the screenshot, and the link is going to be equal to Charles screenshot A, its screenshot URL. So if we go on to the bubble features page and we now take a screenshot of it, click on take screenshot, see we're creating a new thing in the background. And if we go into our database now, you can see we have this URL. And if we copy that and put it in here, I don't think it's going to work because we need to put the HTTPS in front of it. And then that's our screenshot there, which we can't access. So the way you would access this, if you wanted to, reference it in the future, you could, I should have probably left my repeating group there, but let's just get the most recent screenshot. What we can do is, let's put a link here, and we're going to go for open screenshot. And the destination is going to be an external URL. The destination URL is going to be equal to Chrome's Charles screenshot A, its screenshot URL. So let's refresh our page. And in fact, let's just go to the pricing page, the Bubble app, click on this, take a screenshot. That's been taken. You can see there that the sidebar modal actually does get hidden for just a second while the screenshot has been taken. This is so this doesn't appear in the screenshot itself. Then if we open up the screenshot, you can see there it's coming in, which isn't really what we want, come to think of it. So what you might want to do instead is go to change this, put in another button and say go to screenshot. And we're going to go to Charles, and we're going to go say open. Where is our open tab or open URL, I should say? Plugins. Open new tab, of course, and that's going to be equal to Charles screenshot A's screenshot URL. Let's try that one more time. Take a photo of our documentation page here, take screenshot. That should be saved down. Go to screenshot, and you can see then it's opened up and we have that saved down for future reference. So that's how you use the Charles screenshot element. And then the last one we want to look at for right now, we might look one or two more in the middle of the use cases, but let's go to show a native alert. And what we can do here is we can do a couple of things that are useful with this. First of all, let's just say show alert. Let's get rid of that. And we'll go to Charles show alert, and we'll just say this is an alert. And then if we go to any other page, open it up, refresh our application, and show alert, this is what you get. And now, like, there's not really going to be many use cases where you're simply just showing an alert, but where this can be useful is, let's say you have functionality like for a bookmark manager where you only want to be able to save down certain URLs. It can be useful to show an alert if the user isn't on a specific page. So what I mean by that is, let's say that we only want to be able to save down URLs where it's a Bubble plugin page. So if we go to Bubble and we go to plugins, let's say we're building a bookmark manager for Bubble plugins. Well, maybe we want to save down the title and the URL of specific plugins so we can kind of keep a reminder of them for later. But we don't want to be able the user to be able to save down a page if they're not on a Bubble plugin page. So what you can do is you can say, let's go back here and we're going to go to save plugin. I'll get rid of that. We're going to say we're going to delete that, but we're going to create a new thing. We're going to create a bookmark. Title is going to be equal to Charles tab info's title, and URL is going to be equal to Charles tab info's URL. But we're only going to run this workflow when Charles tab info's title, or no, URL I should say, contains, and then I'm going to go down and find my arbitrary text operator, which is there. And we're only going to do it if it contains, and let's go back to our Bubble plugin URL, this. So then we're going to say we're going to copy this, we're going to paste it, and when it doesn't contain that arbitrary text, we're not going to create a new bookmark. We're going to go to Charles, show an alert, and we're going to say you must be on a Bubble plugin page to save down a bookmark. And now if we go onto our toolbox page, which we're on, and if we go to save this plugin, that's going to work out fine. If we go to our database, we should see that saved down now underneath bookmarks. But if we go to Sky Sports and we want to save down this page, you can see now we're getting this alert saying you must be on a Bubble plugin page to save down a bookmark. So it can be useful if you want to restrict behavior, but explain to the user why they can't do something with your Chrome extension. That's often where I see people use alerts. Okay, let's go on to our specific use cases. And we've actually already kind of tackled this first one, the bookmark manager. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to kind of take in what I've done already and I've just improved it here in the background. So what I have is just a bit of a better layout where we have, a logo and, a text element. But what is the most core part of this is the save plugin button. So again, I'm assuming that you want to create a plugin bookmark manager, where if you find a Bubble plugin that you like, you want to be able to go into it, and then you want to be able to bookmark it for later so you know what's there. And I think that this one's saved down already, so what you'll actually see is, yeah, you already get this alert saying you've already saved this plugin. But if we were to go for a plugin that I hadn't saved down already, let's take a look here at some of the featured ones. I'm going to save down leafy maps, so we'll click on that. And if I wanted to save this down, I would open up my extension, click on Save Plugin. You can see it pops in here, and then at any later stage, I can open up any of these plugins and I'll be able to go back to them. So it's pretty simple underneath the hood. If you go to the Workflow tab here, there's actually only 3 actions on the entire page. And what we have is when the user clicks this Save Plugin button, we're creating a new plugin, and that's a custom data type that I've created where it has a link and a name. And we're creating that from the Charles tab info element, its URL, and we're also getting the Charles element text days element text. So that's something we haven't actually looked at just yet. And let's go and have a look at that on our page itself. Yeah, so I should have gone through this one earlier, but maybe just for reference now, what this is you can see here we have the selector H1. And this is essentially a query selector. We're taking the first element on the page with the header H1, and we're saving that down. If we had taken the approach we had taken earlier, which was to use the Charles tab info, we could have done Charles tab info and gotten its title. That kind of would have worked, but the problem is, we'll see in a second here when we save down another one, the title of the page isn't just the plugin name, it's something else as well. So if, for example, we were saving down the, let's go with the Discord plugin. Can't believe that has 115,000 installs, to be honest, and doesn't actually seem to be active or available, so maybe that explains why. But let's say SSO login. Let's say we wanted to save this one down. If we used the tab info element and click save plugin, you'll see we end up with this, which is fine, but it's not really the title by itself, which is kind of what we want. So that's why I recommend getting rid of that. And then we're going to go for name, and we're going to go for Charles element text A, and it's element text. So the element text element is something that I've dropped on. You can see this is it here. And you can see here I've set the selector as H1. And the reason I've set the selector as H1 is if I right click on the actual title itself, I'm just going to get rid of this for a second. But if I right click on this, if I go to inspect and I go to my Chrome developer tools, you'll see here that this has the H1 tag. And that's why I'm picking H1 as a selector. If instead I put in H2, let's say, which would be free by the looks of it. Let's just see what happens when I do that. H2. And then when we save plugin, we're getting, yep, that. So let's refresh, open that up. And I'm guessing this time when I click save plugin, I'm actually going to get H2, which would be free. And I'm actually not getting anything by the looks of it. Maybe there isn't any H2 element there. Let's take a look again, just to be sure. Back here, element text, H2. And then, sorry, I'm getting plugin details here. So plugin details, that's this. This is a H2. So that's why that's coming up. So in a way, it's kind of convenient that it's worked out that a H1 on this page is this kind of plugin title. It'll often be the case that the primary piece of information you want is H1. But if I change this to H1, refresh my application, save it again, yeah, you'll see this time we get just a plugin name, which is what we want. And then just for reference, what I'm doing here is this is a repeating group, and I'm simply just getting all the plugins that I've saved down and adding them in here. Now, you don't have to do this just for Bubble plugins. You could do this for any category of thing. It could be Amazon products. It could be, YouTube videos, whatever you want to build a bookmark manager for. It's really possible with Charles. Anything else on this that's worth discussing? Yeah, so one thing I've done is I've searched for plugins where the count is 0 and it contains the bubble.io plugin. Basically, I don't want to double add in the plugins. If I've already added a plugin, I don't want it to be added again, which is why I'm using this alert here. I've also added in conditions so that I must be on a bubble plugin page to save down the data. You might remember we covered that earlier, but again, what I'm doing is I'm getting this arbitrary text, bubble.io/plugin, and I'm saying if the tab URL doesn't contain that, then I'm going to show that alert. And that's really it. I'm using the Charles Open New tab to link the repeating group entries to a specific plugin, and that's how you build a bookmark manager. So that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so next I want to go on to how you can build a Chrome extension that automates browser actions. So this is clicking on buttons, this is adding content to inputs. And again, Charles makes this really simple. And for the example here, we're going to be using, I am going to want to sign up to this newsletter here. So really simple, we just want Charles to automate putting in an email address and then clicking on the sign up button. Now, we could, of course, do much more complex things like filling out multi-part forms, but just to kind of give you a sense of how to do it, we're going to start off here. And the key is with our app, and I've now just added this automate button, we have a couple of actions we can use. And if we think about our goal here, it's to, first of all, add our email to this input form, and Charles actually comes with a workflow to handle exactly this type of use case, and it's called Charles populate an input field. Now, there are two values that we need to put in here. The first is the value itself, which is going to be our email address. So I'm just going to put in my email address there. And then the second one is how we tell Charles which specific input we want to put our email address into. You'll see here, if we click on the show documentation, we're saying that we're going to be using query selector, which is a kind of JavaScript function, to choose the specific input field. So we're going to need to add something to identify what the input field is into this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the enter your email input. I'm going to have a look at the elements in my DOM via the Chrome developer tools. And I can see here that straight away we have a class on this input, and it's called FormKit input. Now, what I could do is I could just copy this. I could go back here and I could paste this in, and this might work. So let's just give this a go. If we get out of that, let's just refresh our page, open up our Chrome extension, which we're still using the sidebar here. Then if I click on automate, that's not exactly working. So we haven't exactly put it in the right way. So what I found is a really nice way to figure out exactly how to target a specific element is if you right click on it and you find it in the Chrome developer tools here, you right click again, you go to copy element, and then I use Claude, but you can obviously use ChatGPT as well, and say, how can I target this element with query selector, which again just reminds you is the piece of code we're using in the source code to actually choose something. Okay, and we're getting a couple of different options here, and you can see we had it slightly wrong. I think we were actually just missing the dot at the start, but you could also use one of these formats here. But I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to go back here, put in this at the start, and now hopefully if we refresh our app and then open up our Chrome extension and keep an eye on this here, click on automate, and you see there my email address has been popped in. Now, one word of warning, when you're using CSS selectors, it's going to return the very first instance on the page of the input field with this kind of selector. So if there's multiple ones, it's going to take the first one. So you may need to use a more specific way of targeting an element if there's multiple instances of it on the page. Okay, but next thing we want to do is we want to click on this button. We've automated the input of my email address, but now we want to actually click on the sign up button. So again, Charles comes with an action that makes this super easy, and it's called Charles simulate mouse click on element. And this time we just need to provide a selector again, because we obviously don't need to kind of change anything about it. So again, I'm going to go back to my page here, and I'm going to click on inspect, and we can see here, okay, we've automatically kind of clicked on the class with the sign up text. We actually want to click on the button itself, and I can see that this is the class. So I'm going to go and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put this in, and this won't work as it is. What we actually need to do when we're combining classes like this, you see there's a space here. You don't want the space. You want to get rid of that, put in the dot, and we're going to put in at the start as well. And then one more thing, I don't want this to happen at exactly the same time as this. So I'm just going to add a quick pause beforehand. Add a pause, even 500 millisecond, which is half a second. And then let's get out of that, refresh our page, open up our extension, and okay, watch for the email and watch for the button. Click on automate, and you can see we've now signed up for the newsletter. Now, I don't recommend using this to just, spam sign up for newsletters, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how exactly you can automate browser actions using Charles. Next, I want to look at how you can summarize text with AI in a Chrome extension. So what we want to try and do is take the text from a web page, so this article to be specific, and we're going to try and get a short summary of it and do all this via a Chrome extension. So there's two kind of tasks here. Number one is providing our Chrome extension with access to this text. And then the second one is summarizing with AI, and there's a bunch of plugins we can use to do that. But maybe giving our Chrome extension access to this text is our first step. And again, it's pretty easy to do with Charles. what you're going to want to do is search for the Charles element text element, drop that somewhere on your page. Again, this isn't going to show up to the end user, but you do need to have it on there to get things working. And again, we can use this selector. And because we want to give Charles access to the entire page, what we can do is we can simply put in body, and that'll give it access to all of the elements on the page. And just to give you a sense of how this looks, if we put in our text, we can put in insert dynamic data, Charles element text A, it's element text. And now when we open up our Chrome extension, we've gone back for the pop-up here, as you can see. We now have access to all of the text here. So next, we're going to pass this text to OpenAI, their API. We're going to ask it to summarize it, and then we're going to display the summary in our Chrome extension again. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to delete that because we don't want the entire body showing up in our Chrome extension. And I've installed the OpenAI ChatGPT/4 Assistant Vision plugin. This is just the one I'm using. There's a bunch of different ones you can use, and it's really up to you how you get the data back from OpenAI. Put in API keys here, which I will change after this video. But what I'm going to do is when someone clicks on a summarize button, I'm going to go to plugins, and then we have under here OpenAI create chat completion default settings for beginners. That sounds perfect. And what I'm going to say is summarize this text in 5 paragraphs or sentences even. And then I'm going to put in insert dynamic data, and I'm going to put in Charles element text A, and its element text. So this is going to create the summary, but we obviously need to display it somewhere. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use a custom state to house the results. And if you look on our index page, which is this page we're using, you'll see I've created this custom state called summarize text. And just as a side note, I always like putting my custom states on the index page itself. I just find that way you always know where they're going to be, and you don't have to go looking for specific elements where you may have put it and then forgotten. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to set the state of an element. The element is going to be index, and that summarize text custom state, and it's going to be result of step 1, it's body choices, and then we're going to go for the first items, message content. Now, this is just a way that this particular plugin returns stuff from OpenAI. It may be different depending on your own setup, but that's how you get the result back, at least using this plugin. Okay, so we're sending back our summarized text, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get a text element, drop it in here, and we're going to say summary of page, and then we're going to put insert dynamic data, and we're going to go to indexes, summarize text, and leave that there. And let's try that. It's actually not going to work just this time, I'm pretty sure, but I know why and I can explain. So click on summarize, and nothing's happening, and that's because sometimes when dealing with the OpenAI APIs, I've noticed you need to put in at the end here, find and replace. We need to put in the double comma and also find and replace the single comma. It just seems to confuse OpenAI when you don't do that, but hopefully this time now, when we load up our extension and we click on summarize, you can see something's happening there in the background. Just give it a second. And now we get our summary of the article, and we get it in 5 sentences. Now, you could also run this on page load. It doesn't necessarily have to be triggered by a button click. Let's just see how that looks. If instead we said replace event type, and we just said page is loaded, and we got rid of our button, and we refreshed our Chrome extension, or let's even go for a different article. Let's go down here. These are all premium. Let's try this one. Open up our Chrome extension, and it should be loading in the background. And you can see there, that's again giving us a kind of summary of the long text on the page. So yeah, that's how you can build an AI summarizer into a Chrome extension. There's obviously a ton of different other ways you could use AI with your Chrome extension to do things and take data from the page and then, you know, get some sort of output from an LLM, but hopefully that'll give you a sense of how to do it. The last example I want to go through is how to build a bubble component library. So this is where you might create a component that might be a group, that might be some sort of elements, you know, combined into something in your bubble app, and you want to reuse them later. So what we're going to show here is how you can save these down to your Chrome extension and then use them in a different app at a later stage, which will hopefully save you quite a bit of time. So I've just built a very kind of basic skeleton of a component library Chrome extension here. You can see we have a button that says Save Component, and we also importantly have two elements from the Charles plugin on our page. The first is the Charles Chrome storage, and this is really important because the way we're going to build this is by referencing values from Chrome's local storage, and I'm going to go through that in a second. Then we also have the Charles selected text element. We do have a custom data type here that we're going to be working with, and that is the component custom data type. And I have two fields here. One is JSON, which is going to reference the JSON that represents each component you're saving down. And again, we'll explain more in a second. And then the name of the component that we're saving down. So before I actually get into building out the workflows associated with this, I think it's worth spending a minute just on what actually happens under the hood when someone copies an element in Bubble. So I have two Bubble apps open here. I have my Charles landing page app, and I also have a kind of test app, which I'm going to open up a blank page on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click anywhere on my page. I'm going to open up Chrome Developer Tools, and I'm going to go across to Application. I'm going to clear out all the existing keys that are there, which I can do by clicking this button. And now when I click on something and copy, you're going to see a bunch of values appear in here. And the one that's really important for us is this one here, Bubble Element Clipboard. These are all values that are saved down in Chrome's local storage. And if I just kind of click on the value for the Bubble Elements Clipboard, copy that, and let's just paste it into any text element for a second. You'll see here it's a bunch of JSON. And this is effectively what represents the Bubble component that we've just copied. And if we can save this down and then reference it later, we're going to have our component library up and running. So let's get rid of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when the Save Component button is clicked, what we're going to do is we're going to use this action that comes with Charles. It's called Charles Read from Local Storage at Charles Chrome Storage. There's only two fields we need to provide values for here, and the first one is variable name. And what this is effectively this value here, the Bubble Element Clipboard. If we were looking for another value that's saved down in Chrome local storage, we might use that. So you can see things like user ID, we have the email associated with the user, but we obviously just want the Bubble element that we're copying at this stage. So I'm going to paste that in there. And then for context, this defines which specific Chrome storage we're taking it from. In our case, we're going to want it from the active tab, because when we open up our extension here, this is the active tab here, the app we're actually copying the element from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just demonstrate how this is working is I'm going to grab a text element, I'm going to put it up here, and I'm going to call this variable name, and then we're going to reference Charles Chrome Storage's variable name. I'm going to copy this, paste it, and then we're going to have another one that's going to be equal to variable value, and it's going to be Charles Chrome Storage variable value. Okay, let's refresh our application. And now when we copy this element and open up our Chrome extension and click on Save Component, you can see here we're getting the JSON for that particular component coming through here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to save this down to our database. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have a custom data type component with JSON and name. So what's going to happen is when the Save Component button is clicked, you might think the obvious thing to do would be to create a new thing and just create a component, but I've actually found that doesn't necessarily always work just because there's a bit of a lag between from when the JSON is read in and when it can be saved down. But instead what we can do is we can add a different workflow and we can use this at Charles Chrome Storage local variable as read event. So this event is going to be triggered whenever we read in a value from Chrome local storage. So I'm going to create a new thing. We're going to create a component. And for now, we're just going to set the JSON to be equal to this Charles Chrome Storage's variable value. So let's refresh our application again. Once again, let's copy this element. Let's open up our extension. Let's save the component down, and let's take a look at our database this time. Go to app data, and you can see here we've one save down. So this is a good start, but what we actually want to be able to do is, I suppose, reference this in an extension and then use it again at a later stage. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to first of all add a name to our components so they have some sort of thing to define them. So what I'm going to do is when the save component button is clicked, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, yes, read from local storage, but we're also going to open an external, or we're going to show an element, I should say. So let's show an element, and I'm going to show this pop-up save component. When this component is open, or when that pop-up is open, they're going to have the option to save component. So what we're going to do then is we're going to create a new thing. We're going to create component, and JSON is going to be equals to Charles Chrome storage A's variable value. And the name is going to be equal to input, not input, what do we have this called? Input style button is the name for whatever reason, but let's just use that. Input style buttons value. We're then going to reset our relevant inputs, and we're going to hide the pop-up. We're also going to delete this event here. Now, the reason I'm comfortable doing that is it's obviously going to take a few seconds for the user to actually save down the component after they've typed in the name and the pop-up has appeared. So I don't think there's any risk of the JSON not being passed through the Chrome storage element. So let's have another look here and try this again. And also before I do that, actually what I should do is just delete what we had in here. And this time let's refresh one more time actually just to be safe. Okay, let's copy the top bar this time. So right click copy. Let's go into our extension. Let's go to save component, and we're going to call this nav bar. And then we're going to save the component down. And now if we look inside our database, what we should have is, yes, element saved down under the name, the JSON. What I'm actually just going to do is delete the previous one, so we don't have to worry about that. And let's copy a few more elements in here as well. So let's go for this, copy, save component. I'm going to call this hero section. And let's go for one more. Let's go for this section here. So again, right click, copy, open up our extension, save component, and we'll call this features. Save that component down. Okay, so we now have saved down our three components. You can see here I've also put in this copy and this trash icon. So the trash icon is just going to allow you to delete the component, but we're more concerned with the copy one for now because we're going to use this to open up another application, and then the idea is that we can copy in our components from here into this app. And what we're going to do effectively is once that copy icon is hit, or clicked I should say, what we're going to do is we're going to write to local storage. So effectively what we're doing is we're taking the JSON we copied down into our database, and then we're actually pasting it into, or not pasting, but rather writing it to our Chrome local storage inside here, so that we have that bubble element clipboard value populated, which effectively means that bubble thinks we've copied it and can use it again somewhere else. So I'm going to go back here, and we're going to say the variable name, you might remember, is bubble element clipboard. We're going to set the context to active tab, and then importantly, the value is going to be equal to parent groups components JSON. Okay, so let's refresh our application here. And let's open up our extension. So I'm going to go to, let's copy the hero section first, right click, paste, and you can see we have it pasted in. Open up it again, use our nav bar, let's paste that in. And then finally, let's paste in our feature section. Perfect. So you can see that they've come across pretty smoothly. So a couple of things to note here. First of all, you notice the button is a slightly different color than what we had on our actual landing page. That's because styles don't get transferred. So because the primary color on this particular app is the kind of bluey color rather than the purple, that's why we're getting that there. You'll also notice we have some missing elements here. I believe this is a plugin that we actually had installed in the other app and hasn't been installed on this one. So that can cause kind of things like this to happen as well. But yeah, that's how you do it. Maybe one more thing to note is we're using the pop-up here, but it can actually be quite useful to have the sidebar for this particular use case because then it will always stay open even as you're copying and pasting. Whereas at the moment, you can see if I'm copying this and then I'm clicking in here, the pop-up is disappearing, which may or may not be your desired behavior. It really depends. But anyway, that's how you build a component library with Charles, and I hope this has been useful and you've seen some of the different use cases you have for building Chrome extensions with Bubble. If you do have any questions, you can let us know in the comment section below.